What's up everyone? I wanted to make this video to talk about LUTs, node trees, and the basic process that I use when going about coloring an image. Now in this video I'm going to be using LUTs from my Gen 2 LUT bundle that is on my website, and it also includes this node tree, which is originally inspired by Cullen Kelly. And if you don't know about him, I would very highly recommend checking out his channel because he talks about color grading like nobody else out there. And I have adapted a little bit of this node tree to work better for the way that I like to grade, and it has worked very well for me so far. So this video should be short. I laid out 3 clips that have some different lighting scenarios, all from films that I've shot on the Red, and I wanted to just kind of go through how I would approach color grading these shots. So for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that I didn't have a show LUT. I didn't pick anything in advance to shoot with, or maybe I did, but I'm kind of just gonna sift through these LUTs, pick what I feel matches what I want the most, and then work from there. So before we get started, I want to show you some important project settings before you color anything. So I'm gonna go up here to File, and I'm gonna go to Project Settings. I'm gonna start in Camera Raw. If you are editing raw footage, then this is absolutely essential. Pick whatever camera's footage you are going to be editing. In this case, it's Red, and I'm gonna put it at the highest quality that it can go, Full Res Premium, and set the bit depth to 16. Now you don't need it like this if you're editing or cutting or anything like that, but for actual color grading, I want as much detail and bit depth, colors, everything that I can get out of this camera, so that is what I'm going to do. Next is in color management. Go down to your 3D lookup table interpolation and set this to tetrahedral. It is just a vastly superior way to, I guess, interpret LUTs in the software, and it helps to reduce banding and artifacts, and it's just brilliant, amazing. So those are 2 big settings that I would change before starting. And from there, I'm just going to pick a LUT. So this is the node tree that I use. This is what is included in the LUT bundle as well. And I'm just going to very quickly go through what all of these nodes are. So the first one down here that I have is the LUT/ODT, or output device transform. So this is where you're going to put your LUT or your Rec 709 conversion, or whatever you're wanting to convert your footage into what you will deliver it to. So these prior LUTs are going to start with your IDT, which is your input device transform. This is where you'll do a color space transform to change whatever footages you're using to what you want it to be. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to edit in DaVinci Wide Gamut. This is where I would set my Red Wide Gamut and my Red Log 3G10, because that's the camera's color space and gamut that I shot in, and I'm going to change it to DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate. Now, I'm not going to color in this, but that is just an example of how you can use the IDT. Next is noise reduction. I like noise reduction being at the beginning of my node tree because I want to bite the issue at the source. I would rather add noise reduction to what exists in the raw file rather than just what I can see, because I want to color the most pristine image that I can. I don't always use noise reduction. In fact, I wouldn't even say that I use it a lot, but it's nice to have that node just in case. The next node is the exposure node. This is where I'll make big exposure adjustments in case I overexposed or underexposed. And the way that I do that is with the gain wheel, because I've set this node to be in linear gamma, because the way that the tools react with linear gamma is pretty much as close to photometric adjustments as you can get, aside from the HDR wheels as well now. But I really like the gain method, so you only really use the gain wheel for these adjustments, and it is beautiful. The next node is going to be contrast. This is where I'll add contrast here. I'll use curves. I can use lift, gamma, gain, whatever works best, but this is the node for contrast. My third node is going to be white balance. This is also in linear gamma, so it's going to react the same way that the exposure node does, where I will make my adjustments in the gain wheel. This is where you'll change the white balance. Again, it happens pretty close to photometric accuracy, and it just feels like you changed the white balance in the camera itself. Now, underneath all of these is where I'm going to do my own custom adjustments. So this is where I'll add power windows and masks and things of that sort. And right after that is going to be saturation. So the way that I do saturation is with an HSV node. The color space here is set to HSV, which stands for hue, saturation, and value. Value being essentially how bright or dark a color is. And I've unchecked channels 1 and 3. This means that the node is only affecting saturation. And from there, you can use the gain wheel again, but this time it's going to affect how saturated your colors are. And the way that it works in HSV, again, I just think it is beautiful. I think it's much better than the saturation slider here or using the RGB mixer. I love the results from this, and that is what has worked best for me. Then the last node that I have down here is a glow node. I've just kind of pre-built a soft light glow that sometimes really adds a nice little wrapper onto the gift of beautiful colors that you have bestowed upon your images. So I'll play around with that a little bit. But in the meantime, I'm going to go to the LUT node and we will pick out something to start with. So most of these LUTs in this bundle are inspired by different films, hence the name. TLOU is The Last of Us, LTWB is Leave the World Behind. They all have their own inspiration. They're all just kind of a play on the film look, and I'm very happy with them. These are what I use on every film that I grade, and it's a great starting point for me. So for this, I think I'm going to use this Kodak Play-Doh LUT. It's nice and heavy. I love the saturation in the warm channels. It's, I think, a really good starting point. So I'm going to begin by doing exposure, and that's where I'll just use my gain wheel. Just kind of set the image in a place where I like it as a starting point. I'm okay with this being a little bit darker. Probably be like here. Now I'm going to go into contrast. I really like using the gain wheels, the primaries for contrast. You just have some good flexibility there. So I'm trying to keep the shadows really low by using my lift. And then I'm trying to balance it with my gain wheel. I want this to be a naturally kind of moody image, but I don't want the shadows to be crushed. All right, I think I like that. Really brought those highlights down a lot. It's a nice moody, dark image, and I really like how that looks. So after that, I'm gonna go into white balance. Now, I don't think that we really need to white balance that much. I like where it is, but I'm going to add a little bit of green just as a creative adjustment. Maybe a tad towards yellow. Because I like the blue coming from outside, and I like the warmth here. Now is where we get to the part that I really like about color grading. This is where I'm going to start using masks. And the point of these masks is to shape the light that exists in the scene to guide the viewer's eye where I want it to go. In this example, I want people to look at my actor here. And parts of the frame that I find distracting are going to be like this corner. There's a lot of dead space. Even though there's a little bit of light texture on it, it's bright and I feel like it's distracting. And I feel the same way about this table and the wall here. I'm going to begin by using the curve tool here, and I'm just going to draw a mask around this part of the frame that I find distracting. Very simple. I'm going to feather this a bit, and I'm going to do the same for up here. So I'm going to add another curve tool, and I'm just going to draw over what I find distracting. Feather that out a bit, and then now I'm just going to bring my gain down. It might be too much. You don't want it to be too obvious, but I'm trying to just kind of feel it. See, I feel like this pulls the frame together a bit more. Just kind of gives it that little bit of focus on my character. I'm also going to do Alt P, and I'm going to add a parallel node. And I'm going to drop down this side of the frame just a little bit. Maybe I'll drop the lift. Ooh, I like that better. So I'm just taking the lift down a little bit, trying to make it blend with the adjustments I've done already. If you hit Shift H, you can see what you're affecting. And I kind of go right along the line of this table as well as the line that this lamp is creating. And that just brings that down a little bit. See, already I feel like I'm a lot more focused on my actor here. If I go before and after. And I didn't have to do any keying or anything. I'm also going to enable this glow node at the very end of the node tree. Ooh, I like that. Just kind of adds a little bit of haze. So that was actually very simple. I really didn't have to do that much. You can always add more, and it's going to come down to just how particular you want to be and how much time or budget you have. You can always add like radial masks, things of that sort. Maybe brighten this part a little bit. Maybe not that much. And I'm just using Control D to cycle this on and off. I really like keybinds. They speed things up a ton. If I really wanted to get fancy, I could add some other elements, but I think I'm going to leave it right here actually. Just keep it simple. I typically like when things are kept simple. They look a little bit better. So that's a good example of frame one. I'm going to go to the second frame, and again, I'm going to pick a LUT. This is a different project. Ooh, I like this. I'm primarily looking at this window here in the background. I'm looking at those highlights, and then I'm also looking at the skin tones here. See, that's a little bit too saturated for me, just a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with this asphyxia LUT. From there, I can already tell the exposure is pretty good. It's just about where I like it. And then I'm just going to take my contrast and bring my lift way down. And then bring my gamma and gain. Play with those a little bit. I like that. So I'm keeping it simple. I'm using these wheels. I'm not even using a control panel or anything like that. I'm putting my mouse over these dials down here, and I'm just using the mouse wheel, where you can click and you can drag. You don't need a huge set of panels or anything like that to color grade. I'm just doing keyboard and mouse. So from there, I am probably going to add a little bit of warmth into this image, just because it is like a Western. And then I'm going to go into HSV, play a little bit with the gain here. And then now I'm going to do my masking. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did in the other one, where I'm just going to figure out what do I want the audience to focus on. And in this case, if I would assume it's obvious that it's my actor. So I'm going to brighten him up a little bit because I feel like his face is a little bit underexposed. And now another thing is I have all my scopes open in another window, and they're very, very important. But when it comes to exposing skin tones or anything, I wouldn't say that there's a value that I'm necessarily trying to put them on. Interviews and commercials will probably be a bit different, but for narrative, you just got to pick what feels right for the scene, what tells the story, what tells the story the best. And in this case, I think this is looking pretty good. I might even pull this in a little bit. And then I'm going to do Alt P again to add a parallel node. And this is where I'm going to draw in a mask again. So I'm going to find what is distracting to me, and I'm just going to mask it. feather that out nice and good, and then just bring that down. I like that. So see, in just 2 nodes, we've really pulled our actor out of this background. But I'm even going to add another one, and I'm going to try to darken this right side of frame. I still think it's a little bit distracting. Just pull that down. It also kind of shows us a little bit of the detail that's outside the window. The red Komodo really has some awesome dynamic range. Of course, it's not the best out there, but I like that. Not too shabby. So right off the bat, it's kind of a good looking frame. I'm also going to add the glow, and I feel like that just kind of ties it together. Typically, I would add a film grain to this as well. So you can add another node, go up here to grain. The presets are pretty good. I'm going to go to 35mm. And then I'm just going to bring this up a little bit. I know that you're probably not going to be able to see this on YouTube, but I think it looks pretty good. Just add a little bit of texture to this image and brings it to life, especially for a Western. Now, one other thing is I like to sharpen my images sometimes. A very, very easy and rudimentary way to do it is just to go to the blur tab, and then take your radius down a little bit. I find that 48 is typically pretty good, and that just adds a little bit of a bite to the footage, especially if you have grain on the image. It sharpens that grain, which you may or may not like. Sometimes I put the grain after the sharpening, so it doesn't sharpen the grain itself. I think it depends on the image. Just want to be careful not to sharpen it too much. But I like this. So I'll show you what we started with. Highlight everything except our LUT. That was our before, and there's after. Very simple adjustments on this one. Just some isolation of our actor there. Bringing down those highlights a little bit. Now our last frame. I'm really just soaring through this. Another different lighting scenario. This is outdoors. This was from a horror film, but we shot it to look very bright so that it kind of plays with the visual theme of what you would typically expect from a horror film. I'm going to pull the exposure down just a little bit. I want it to still be bright and lively, but just not too much. I'm actually going to enable that glow again. Just add some nice contrast in there. I don't even feel like contrast needs to be adjusted too much, but maybe I'll just soften those highlights a tad. But my main thing here is I'm going to actually I'm going to take a radial mask and I'm going to bring the aspect ratio down to 0. And that's going to make these lines perfectly parallel, and if you use Shift H you can see what you're affecting. I'm going to bring this in and I'm going to flip it by clicking this. So now it's affecting the outside, and that's where I'm just going to bring the gain down a little bit, just a couple notches, and that just brings some of that attention back to our actress. I'm also going to use the gradient here, reverse that, and kind of come down there. Very subtle adjustments. You really don't have to go overboard with it, but it just kind of guides the viewer's eye in there. Now, one other thing that I really like to do is if you go here into the color warper, you can, I'm going to increase my dots just a little bit, 8 or 12. You can select a skin tone. So I'm going to click there on her head and it selects that dot, and then you can take the hue and you can move it to be exactly where you want it to be. And then I'm going to bring the saturation down a little bit so she's not oversaturated. But see that adjustment there? I feel like it really just can affect the skin a lot in a very, very good way. And you can really shape the skin to be exactly what you want it to be. I don't know if you're able to see this or not, but just that little adjustment, selecting the skin on the color warper, playing with hue and saturation, can really dictate how well your skin is balanced within an image. Because in this image, the way that the white balance was, I loved where all the colors were falling, but the skin tones were just a little bit oversaturated, and part of that comes from this LUT. But when you play with it a little bit like that, it kind of pulls the image together. So I know that I kind of sped through this video, but the idea was just to show you this node tree, show you kind of how I color grade with LUTs and how I would go about just generally approaching an image. It's really about guiding the viewer's eye to what you want them to see and what you want them to look at and feel when they're looking at this image. You can always play more if you have the time. I would suggest just experiment with it. So anyways, have a good day. Thank you for watching this, and I hope that you were able to take something from it.